What's up, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL, and you can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Speaking of which, I do want to give a cheap plug quickly to the Pack a Day podcast. You've obviously been watching this. This is the YouTube series. I'm on here 365 days a year, but we also have an amazing group of individuals, over 20 people that are bringing you an audio podcast 365 days a year as well. We have been doing this for over 3 years now. You get a brand new episode every single day. They're usually longer. Usually they're in the 30 to 40 minutes sort of range. If you're looking for another Packers source to add to your routine, make sure to check out the audio version of the Pack a Day podcast. People like Dusty Evely and Ross Uglum and Mark Eckel and Janelle Mackey and Sarah Kelleher and Perry Goldstein and Maggie Loney, and the list goes on and on and on. Just a tremendous group of amazing people who put so much time, effort, and energy into their craft. So if you are not checking that out already, please make sure to do so. Cheap advertising plug there. But let's jump into our topics today. Have some news and notes from Monday. We'll talk a little bit about whether the Packers should or shouldn't play against the Lions, at least their starters. They should play the game. It's probably a decent idea. But whether their starters should play the game. And then we'll get into some grades from the defensive side of the ball in this past week against the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll get to all of that. Let's kick things off with the biggest news of the day. Chauncey Rivers is off COVID IR. That is at least one of the small notes from the day. He is still on IR anyway, so it doesn't really matter from a on-the-field product standpoint, but good for Chauncey Rivers' health, if nothing else. Also, we learned that Amari Rodgers and Kingsley Keke will also be activated off of that COVID IR list. They'll move to the commissioner's exemption list and then likely get removed completely, in the next couple days here, probably tomorrow. And then they should be able to play on Sunday if, the Packers so desire and if they're ready to go. So Keke, Rodgers, and Chauncey Rivers all activated off of COVID IR. Again, Chauncey Rivers is on the actual IR list, so that's mostly irrelevant. Elliott Fry also released from the practice squad. He was their third kicker. Remember, J.J. Molson, their backup kicker, who's on the practice squad, went out with COVID. I think Elliott Fry was signed just as insurance in case Crosby were to test positive on a Sunday, that they would still be able to call somebody up and have a kicker active on game day. Ended up not mattering. Crosby was fine, and now Elliott Fry is no longer on the roster, somewhat expectedly. Also, Green Bay had 3 more players that went on the COVID IR list, including Darnell Savage, Dennis Kelly, and David Moore. All 3 moved to the COVID IR list. David Moore, the practice COVID IR, since he's not actually on the active roster. Now, for those of you concerned about Savage or Kelly and potentially playing this coming weekend, I think we're going to see a lot more of these Monday tests, right? If people test Monday and they test positive, they're going to be out 5 days, but it's still going to give them the opportunity to play. Now, whether Green Bay decides to play some of these players or not on Sunday will remain to be seen. But I think with the playoffs upcoming, expect more Monday tests. And I think with that, because they're not mandatory for players who are vaccinated, with, testing players on Monday who may have some symptoms, that gives them still time to clear in time for the game. So that's sort of going to be a potential workaround we'll see for teams moving forward. But don't be surprised, teams kind of use that to their advantage and start testing on Monday, where, again, if they test positive and are asymptomatic later in the week, they have the opportunity to get back in time for the game. So still worth noting, Darnell Savage, Dennis Kelly, and David Moore all go on the COVID IR list. And again, I think the big thing you're looking for here is no major outbreaks as Green Bay gets into the playoff season. Although, again, likely a lot of tests on Monday and hopefully players able to come back later in the week. Now, speaking of players coming back, David Bakhtiari will practice in some capacity this week, per Matt LaFleur. That is great news. If anyone's still, holding out hope, which I think you should be, that he could potentially play this year, getting him back on the practice field is the 1A way to do that. Now, LaFleur also kind of made an offhanded comment about, ideally they would like to see him in game action this week. I'm sure ideally they'd probably like to see him in game action last week and the week before that as well. I'll believe it when I see it. I'd be pretty surprised if Bakhtiari ended up playing this week. Maybe he gets a handful of snaps just to get reacclimated a little bit if he's ready for that. But they're going to be ultra cautious, and I still think we're probably looking a little bit more, down the road for a potential Bakhtiari return if and when that happens. But regardless, great news to see that Bakhtiari will be back at practice this week, and hopefully that means that his return is just around the corner. All right, let's jump into one of our, not main topics, but, main discussion points of today, I guess. is will the Packers play their starters against the Lions? And Matt LaFleur came out pretty strong and said that he thought the 3-week layoff was too much and that they will play to win against the Lions. Now, I'm sure they're going to play to win, and I'm sure they're going to do everything in their power to, well, mostly everything in their power to win that game, but I don't think that's going to include playing their starters throughout the entirety of that game. I think it's very possible that you could see a half of Aaron Rodgers and, in the starters, Devontae Adams, et cetera. But I think this will be a glorified, what used to be sort of a third preseason game. If you think back when they had 4 preseason games and that third game was sort of the dress rehearsal, you get guys in for maybe a half, maybe a quarter and a half. Let them get some game reps, let them get some rust off, get them ready for the playoffs, and hopefully get everyone out of there with no major injuries. That's sort of what I'm expecting this week. And yeah, I'm sure they're going to play to win, but they're not going to play Aaron Rodgers 4 quarters to win, if you look at it sort of that way. I'm sure they like to get a little bit more of a look at Jordan Love as well. So wouldn't shock me if 2.5, maybe even 3 quarters of Jordan Love this upcoming game. And this is going to be a major topic all week on Sports Talk Radio and anyone that's discussing anything Packers. Should the Packers play Aaron Rodgers at all? Should they play any of their key players at all in this game? And you know me, I'm not going to shy away from a take on anything, right? If I believe something and I, am on board with it, I'm not going to say something to say it, but I'm not going to shy away. And if I feel away, and if I felt wholeheartedly that the Packers are stupid by playing Aaron Rodgers in this game, I would say that. I would legitimately tell you, looking into the camera, looking into your eyes, saying, yeah, this is dumb for them to do this. I don't really have an opinion either way. But what I will say is this. Matt LaFleur is arguably the safest coach in the league when it comes to these type of decisions. And he might be the biggest players coach in that regards as well in the league. I mean, preseason, he's not playing any of his guys that potentially matter and trying to keep them fresh, even if it means that they're completely rusty for week 1, which we saw. He's taking a very cautious approach with that. He's giving veterans time off during the course of the season. If he needs to cancel practice because his guys are tired, he's the first coach to do so. This is the coach that if he is ever going to rest somebody, give players a week off, et cetera, it's Matt LaFleur. He is the coach. He is 1A on my list of coaches that would protect his players in this type of situation. So if Matt LaFleur is saying it's too much time off and these guys need to play, I trust him. I trust him unequivocally. And I think he has earned that. And earned that to the point where whatever decision he makes, I believe he has the best pulse of the team, and I think he has the best, thoughts for what this team should do in his mind when he's going through this decision, getting input from Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers and so on and so forth, to the point where even if he screws it up one way or the other, whether he doesn't play them and they come out flat in in the divisional round, or if they, do play some of these players and they come out injured, whatever he decides, I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think he should be second guessed for whatever he decides, because there is no perfect answer. There is no, there's no calculus to go off of to say this, do this, and you're going to be perfect, right? You could not play guys, and they could be completely rusty, and 3 weeks off was too much, and you end up losing in the divisional round. Not too different from the Packers in 2011 against the New York Giants in the divisional round, 15-1 season, and they had the extra time off, and it didn't do them any good, and they lost to the Giants in the divisional round. You rest players, and that could happen. You play players, and you could end up with a torn ACL for a key player. It is what it is, and there's no perfect answer here. So whatever Matt LaFleur and company decide, I wholeheartedly believe that that's what they think is best based on the current pulse of the team. And after 39 wins and 9 losses in the past 3 regular seasons so far, and what he's done for this team, I think Matt LaFleur deserves the benefit of the doubt. And whatever decision he makes, again, I think he should have 1,000,000% support from just about everyone in that regards. And I think it's really tough to say anything different because, again, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't, and nobody has a better pulse on his team than Matt LaFleur. And again, if any coach were to say, I'm going to sit my players, it's Matt LaFleur. So if he's saying, if him of all people is saying they need to play, I'm going to lean with him. They probably need to play. And I think they're going to do everything in their power to go out, play well early in the half, get a big lead, rest their guys, and then hopefully be ready for a very tough divisional round game, regardless of who they play against. All right, let's jump into grades for this week. I'm going to go over the defense. I'm going to just start by saying this was one of the toughest games to grade that I've ever done. And specifically here from the defensive side of the ball, I haven't looked at the offense yet, but Minnesota was so bad on offense, and Green Bay got to a pretty decent lead where Minnesota just had to, try to throw the ball downfield. And you had a situation where Sean Mannion, had to drop back to pass on multiple occasions where he didn't have much of a chance. It gave pass rushers an opportunity to tee off. They were playing a lot of zone coverage, a lot of off coverage, and just keeping everything in front of them. And for the most part, everything was good, right? They tackled well. Communication was pretty good for the most part. Green Bay got some pressure up front. There's no real big turnover play. There are a couple of sacks here and there, but there's nothing you can point to in this game and be like, well, that was a, unreal play by whomever you want to enter in that sentence. Rashawn Gary had a couple really nice plays, which we'll get to in a second, but overall, I thought the defense just sort of did their job, and Minnesota was bad. Green Bay played sound fundamental football on defense. They tackled well. They stayed in their alleys. They stayed in their run lanes. That's not always going to equate to like huge individual grades, right? But at the same token, very few mistakes, very good technique throughout the course of the game, solid communication, and there were very few negatives. So this was a pretty good get right game for anyone who needed, had some negative grades recently and needed to get their GPA back up. This was sort of like an extra credit test where you're, get an opportunity to boost your grade up a little bit for a lot of players. This was my fourth highest grade for the defense of the season, which is pretty impressive, again, when you consider that there were no, 4 interceptions or anything like that, which are going to garner usually some bigger individual grades. So overall, I thought it was a little bit more difficult to grade and maybe didn't have some of the flash and the pizzazz, but a lot of players who played really well and very few negative grades. In fact, it wasn't really until garbage time late in the game where some of the backups came in where you saw some of these negative grades really start to take hold. As far as the positives, Rashawn Gary was 1A on my list this week. I thought he played a fantastic game, showed terrific burst, showed power, showed the ability to get to the quarterback with nuance in a couple different ways. I just thought he played one of his better games of the season. Better against the run. Still a couple times where he got sucked inside where I still think he needs to work on that. But overall, fantastic game. And you just see those flash plays happening with more regularity. And you can almost count on one big Rashawn Gary, play per game. And that's when you start really becoming a star in this league. When you can start counting on a big play per game for a player, that's big time. And Rashawn Gary's getting to that point. I still think there's things that he can do to round out his game to be a better overall player. But you look at the progression that he's had from rookie year, which was basically a redshirt season, to second year where he was a rotational player and you started seeing those flashes, to now third year where he's a full-time player and everything's sort of come full circle. He's a much more dynamic player. Those flashes happen at a much higher frequency, and now it's just becoming a more well-rounded, all-around player. Maybe not playing with quite as much of your hair on fire and playing a little bit more under control. As he ages and he matures and he progresses, the sky's continues to be the limit for Rashawn Gary. But seeing these flash plays come in much bigger bunches, if you will, is really exciting. I thought he had a really nice game. A couple plays where he got to the quarterback really quick, and whether it was Mannion or Mon, just getting rid of the ball really quickly. But nice game from Rashawn Gary and deserving of the top defensive grade this week. I also had a really high grade on Eric Stokes. Later in the game, again, it's a lot of off coverage, keep everything in front of you, pretty some, safe stuff, or, you're able to play underneath because you've got a safety over the top of you. But there's a lot of one-on-one with Eric Stokes. And, again, part of this is Mannion not challenging, which again is what makes this game so difficult to grade. You didn't see Eric Stokes get challenged down the field, right? And he had good coverage, which is part of the reason why. But we saw some plays against Justin Jefferson when Kirk Cousins was in there where even one-on-one, Cousins wasn't afraid to throw it up to Jefferson in some of those situations. But overall, I thought Stokes had very sticky coverage and was one of his better games as well. He really gave up nothing. He still will hesitate to be a physical tackler at times. I think that's something that is worth sort of keeping an eye on. But overall, really nice game for Eric Stokes. And then number 3 on my list was Dean Lowry. it is time to put the Lowry Lancaster hate to rest. And I've been very critical of Dean Lowry in past seasons. This season is not one of those years. He is a plus player for this team right now. Third best grade of this week. He is playing some really good football. Even early this year, first couple games, I thought he struggled, and it looked like it was going to be a repeat of 2020, where I thought he was pretty poor. But this season, your Lancaster and Lowry hate is not, it's not warranted. And, Lancaster has a slight negative grade on the season. However, what you have to take under consideration with Lancaster is the fact that his negative grades generally come as a pass rusher. And that's not what he's paid to do. And you can say, well, everyone's paid to do whatever. Like his job description is to stop the run and be a nose tackle, run stuffing, run plugging defensive lineman. And more often than not, that's what he is. Is it flashy? Is it sexy? No. But he's keeping players like Devondre Campbell and Chris Barnes clean, and he's holding up well at the point of attack. He's not getting pushed back into the backfield. He's had a pretty darn nice season. And when you just kind of separate out what he can do as a run defender, his grade looks much better than overall. Yeah, he's not going to get to the quarterback. That's not his thing. That's not what he does. But as a sixth defensive lineman, rotational dude, fifth defensive lineman, whatever you want to call it, rotational dude who can stop the run, much better this season. And Dean Lowry's playing some really nice football, especially this week. On the flip side, my three lowest grades, my lowest was Isaac Yiadom. Gets in for a handful of snaps, allows a big completion. I think he allowed another completion, big pass interference penalty. Just did not look good. And again, job description, right? Isaac Yiadom's on this team to be a special teams player. He's a pretty darn good gunner, and he definitely provides a player that they can utilize on special teams, and that's his job. His job is not to be a corner. If he gets in a game and you have to have him cover for 2-3 quarters, you're going to be in trouble. That's just what it is. But as an emergency corner who can play a handful of snaps here and there, if absolutely needed, while also playing some pretty solid special teams, that's his job. But overall, he got in the game, didn't play very well. Tipa Naliai and Oren Burks were my other two very minuscule negative grades. I thought Burks had a couple breakdowns in coverage late in the game, and then Tipa had one play where he got completely pancaked to the ground, a couple other inefficient rushes. Did have one really nice one with a spin move where he got to the quarterback, so there was one really nice rush on tape as well. But overall, just a slight negative for Tipa and Oren. And then last but not least, we talk about, Devontae Adams and the Ravens double teaming him and even seeing some triple teams at times. There may not have been a specific formation or a play call or whatever for Kenny Clark this week for the Minnesota Vikings, but they double teamed him almost every opportunity they could get. They made sure that he was not going to impact them as much as possible, and Clark still impacted the game. Another really sound game for him. Didn't matter if he was double teamed. He worked his butt off per usual, and he's just this defense is so good when Kenny Clark is playing at a high level. He's played at a really high level all this season. Just one of those, I know people respect him. I know everyone loves Kenny Clark, but even still, I still think he's an unsung hero because, it's not always the flash plays with Kenny, but his consistency up front is so special, and what he's able to do to reset the line of scrimmage, free things up for Devondre and Chris, make running backs kick it to the outside where the, edge rushers are just waiting for them when they're setting the edge. Like, he does so much for this team, and this was another really impressive game, especially as he's getting pounded on by two offensive linemen all game long. Still came away with a very solid and positive grade in this game. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow. Make sure to check out that audio version of the Pack a Day podcast. If you're not subscribed here on YouTube, also make sure to do that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.